The content presented is for entertainment purposes only. Some content may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. So if you're watching this clip over at TikTok or Twitch, I really want to know what your guys' thoughts. If you're somebody who really believes in the right of bearing arms and you have your own firearms, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on that. As well as arming our teachers. Do you think that that's something that's really reasonable? Is there any way we can give them a pay bump and maybe some training so that they can actually act if any kind of issues arise? And also, what are you guys' thoughts about Blizzard and Activision getting into the woke neutrality of pronouns? I really would like to get your guys' input. Hello, everybody. Jay Rhymes with the Periodic Review. As you can see, we do not have the Periodic Review crew with me today. And it might be that way for probably through the end of September and possibly into the first week of October. My wife has some stuff that she's working on for work that's really taken up a lot of her time, as well as my good buddy, Mr. AK-47, aka Alakai. He is working with a new schedule with work. And so we're just kind of trying to figure out what's going to be the best time for us to get together. So I hope you guys can be patient with us. I know you guys really enjoy having everybody together. I think we have a really good dialogue and have really good open discussion. And so I'm hoping that we will do this hopefully soon. Maybe we'll try to do it on a weekend or something and do a pre-record and upload it later. Or maybe we'll try to do a live episode like on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and I know that's not the most convenient time for everybody, but maybe it'd be more convenient for us to get together. That way we can still give you guys content as a group. So the first topic, I wanted to kind of talk about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, because it seems that that's continually being attacked, especially on the radical left, to try to continue to make it much more difficult for individuals to actually purchase firearms, to purchase ammunition, to jump in through all kinds of hoops to try to, I wouldn't say prevent, but definitely to definitely say to dissuade people from purchasing firearms. I mean, for me myself, I definitely grew up around firearms. I am an Eagle Scout, and I got my shooting merit badge, as well as doing lots of campouts, firing handguns, firing shotguns, firing rifles, all the way up to a 30-06, which is a pretty good caliber for hunting deer. I've really shot a lot of different firearms, and so I kind of, as well as I've gone through the safety training for becoming an armed guard. Armed guard is in like a security officer, not like or security guard, I should say. I shouldn't say officer because that would be confusing. Not a peace officer, a security guard. I got to shoot with a good handful of retired law enforcement, FBI, CIA, military individuals, and I actually did pretty well in my class. I think out of 20, I think I came in third. Of course, not beating out the veterans, but it was a really interesting experience. And while we were there, it was really good to have individuals, especially those that were part of the National Rifle Association, NRA, because between retired law officers, and military and everybody, as well as the instructors, which a lot of them were retired as well, in the NRA, I feel like I really got a good grasp of how to utilize a firearm, not only in a situation where you need to be safe for yourself and those surrounding you, but also to utilize it in a way to defend yourself or to defend other people. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that firearms are a tool. They don't become a weapon until you utilize it as such. And I really would like to know, like, what it would be like to actually own a firearm, and this is just something I just haven't had the opportunity to do. Very, very busy, working full time. I have a wife. I have a house to take care of. We go and hang out with friends and with family. We spend a lot of time together. We also, I run two content creation channels, this podcast, of course, and as well as a gaming channel. So I'm constantly creating content on both on the podcast front and the gaming front, and there's just a lot going on right now, so I just haven't really taken the time to really go and find and research and what kind of firearm I would want. Ideally, since the one I was actually trained on a Glock 40, I probably would get 9mm more than likely, because I feel like that's more than enough that I feel like you would need to protect, especially, self, home, and others. I think that I shouldn't say if, I should probably say when, because at some point I'm going to have the money and the funds to actually purchase a firearm, actually go to the CCW class, pay for it, get my concealed carry, go through the classes, and actually be able to afford ammunition, because it's so damn expensive. I really don't understand why. I think that's probably a lot of taxes and bullshit involved from government and such, because that's usually what happens when you start infringing on your rights. And it's going to be really interesting, because if when I get to that point where I do purchase a firearm, and you can get a decent used one, it seems somewhere between like $400 and $600 reasonably, if not, depending on the model and stuff, you can go a lot cheaper. Me personally, I definitely want to get what I pay for. And so I'm kind of a snob when it comes to making sure that I have certain brands, especially those that are being used like by military and police officers and stuff like that, because I want to make sure that, not only I keep it clean, I actually utilize it. I actually, put rounds through it, go shooting at least a couple of times every couple of months. And just kind of keep up on the safety, keep it clean, and just make sure that it's stored properly. I think that's all that's like very, very important. So at some point I will, and I plan on it, because I do feel that we're kind of in the place right now with the world where, one power outage for longer than, 48, 72 hours could literally bring large cities to their knees. If let's say something happens, and let's say some terrorist attack happens, and let's say like some rockets hit some neighborhoods, or hits the power grid. Like, heaven forbid they hit like major power grids, and like, or if they actually shoot down like our satellites, or if something like that happens where a major event occurs, and now you have to worry about food and water because you no longer have electricity, you have no way to cart water back and forth if you need to. Let's say they hit our treatment plants, like in the city, like that, like these kinds of things. Like I mean, I don't really think about a lot because I'm just so focused on other stuff. But now that I'm talking about it, that seems like a very scary scenario. If something major like that happens, and 24, 48, 72 hours go by, like it could literally put people in a very predicament, especially if people aren't prepared. And that's something I'm working on as well, is making sure that we have a good stock of food, and most importantly, have a really good stock of water. I'm planning on this weekend, hopefully, to get one of those large blue 35-gallon water jugs. I'm going to fill a couple of those up and store them in our basement, just in case something happens. Like, obviously we want to hope for the best, but definitely plan for the worst. And the worst thing that could happen is, you'll end up going through and eating your, and replacing, your food storage, or replacing your water storage, dumping it out and refilling it. Like, at least have like my goal is to have at least like 30 days. If we really had to like hunker down, no power, no gas, no water, like, could we survive for 30 days? And I think we're almost at a place where we can. And I think once we get the water and we store some fire stuff, such as like briquettes, coal and stuff, charcoal, not coal, but charcoal, and make sure that we have a way to light it, we have a way to distribute, way to store, and keep everything dry and fresh, so that if in the event something does happen, I'm prepared for it. Because I think it would be a very disservice for me and my wife if I didn't at least prepare for if something bad happens. And hopefully nothing does. Hopefully, this whole, world-ending apocalypse thing doesn't happen. I really do hope, and I do pray that people are smarter than the average bear, that people are smart enough to know that we shouldn't nuke each other, or that we shouldn't, disrupt just everyday people, innocent people's lives. And I think this is part of that. I think that having your right to bear arms in the event that something really tragic or bad happens, that you can not only protect yourself, but protect others. And I feel like if you're in a place to do it, that you have the capacity, you have the mental strength to, do what you need to do if a situation arises, then you should consider having a firearm. I think if you don't feel like you could take a person's life in a life or death situation, then maybe that's not the best thing for you. Maybe you can rely on your buddies and friends that have these kinds of things. But these are just some things that I think about. And so I kind of did a little bit of... Yeah, it looks like I have some stuff here, which I have to read, and I have some thoughts and stuff. So I'm quoting from some of these law, Second Amendment, a little bit from Wikipedia, guncarry.com, gun state laws in Utah, which, each state is probably going to have different gun laws, so it's probably going to be a good idea to either ask your police or military buddies that live in the area, and also do your research just to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's and you're not caught with something that you're not supposed to have, or you didn't go through the proper channels, like, things like, you're supposed to get a background check, you're supposed to register the firearm, the serial numbers, all that fun stuff. So, the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And according to federal law, they say that basically means that individuals are allowed to have firearms. Like, that's a constitutional right that's given by the Constitution. And they also believe, of course, because of our founders, they believe that it's a right by God. So that's actually really important. So such language, I just missed up. Such language has created considerable debate regarding the amendment's intended scope. On one hand, some believe that the amendment phrase, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, creates an individual constitutional right to possess firearms. Under this individual right theory, the United States Constitution restricts legislative bodies from prohibiting firearm possession, or at the very least, the amendment renders prohibitory and restrictive regulation presumably unconstitutional. So in other words, like, they can't put any laws in place that says, sorry, you can't own a firearm. They can restrict stuff like, certain ages, you can get certain firearms. You can get maybe like some small game stuff, maybe when you get older, like those kind of stuff. Which I think there can be some reasonable laws put in place for, depending on the age and the caliber and the use of the firearms. I think that's reasonable. Of course, I could be wrong, and I'm sure everybody's going to let me know. So, on the other hand, some scholars point to the prefatory language, a well-regulated militia, to argue that farmers intended only to restrict Congress from legislating away a state's right to self-defense. Scholars call the theory the collective rights theory. Collective rights theory of the Second Amendment asserts that citizens do not have an individual right to possess guns. The local, state, and federal legislative bodies therefore possess the authority to regulate firearms without implicating a constitutional right. So these are some theories. Right now, what's in place is you have the right to bear arms. So there are some, I guess, some opposing views according to that right, but I think there would I mean, I'm not a law person or anything, but I think if we really had to get around and say, oh, well, you have to have a well-regulated militia, okay, then we can just say we're a militia and we could go get our firearms. So I don't know. I just think that some of that is kind of silly. And I think it's important to think is that the reason that we are allowed the right to bear arms, to have firearms, is to not only protect ourselves and our property, but also to protect ourselves from, a tyrannical government coming to take away our stuff because they just decide that that's what they want to do. So in the event that the government goes rogue, which, I mean, historically, I mean, we are, especially in unprecedented times right now where the government is really overreaching and trying to control our speech, trying to control who has the right, who doesn't have the right to speak on these social media platforms. As it's kind of like all of these social media platforms are kind of like the town square, so to speak, and so people should be able to speak freely. Obviously, if they are saying things like condemning somebody, to basically say, oh, we're going to go after this person, we're going to unlife them, or we're going to go after this person and hurt them and their family physically. Like, obviously those things, those aren't okay. But for the most part, like, as long as you're not doing that kind of stuff, like, it's pretty free reign of what you can say. Unfortunately, there is some shenanigans going on, not only within the government, but definitely from radical leftists who are trying their darndest to keep people who say things that they don't like, that are disagreeable to their ideologies, and to keep them from work, keep them from making a paycheck or being on these platforms, which I think is not okay. So what's interesting is that each state has regulations as to how to accommodate firearm purchasers, what they can and cannot reasonably purchase, as well as when and where they can use them for recreation or personal defense. And I think that's something that's very interesting. Like, each state will have certain laws. Some states, allow, open carry. Some states, allow concealed carry, but you have to get a permit. Some places say that you can have, like, so long of a barrel, so many rounds in your clip, or magazine, however you want to call it. We're all saying the same thing. And it's really interesting how many of these laws include age restrictions. So, magazine capacity, permits, and even classes and stuff like that. And I think even if, you're not going to conceal carry, I think it's still really important to go and kind of get yourself familiar with those kinds of things. I think it's really important to kind of get to a point where you feel comfortable with carrying a firearm with a round in the chamber, because if you're not willing to use it and to defend yourself, in life and death situations, then you shouldn't be carrying it, because if you're nervous, you're going to make bad decisions. And that's something that's really important to understand too, because if you get in these kinds of life and death situations, like, a lot of times people call it fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of people, don't realize, oh yes, I have a firearm, I should probably use it. And I think most people, especially people who continue to utilize it as far as, like, taking it to the range and actually using it and actually carrying it all the time, I think those people kind of go with the mindset of, okay, I could possibly use this today. I need to make sure that I remember that I have that tool on me and to use it in those situations. In fact, I mean, what sucks is that in mainstream media today, we're not really seeing, the other side of it. Like, we see the worst of the worst and the bad of the bad. So, like, cops shooting people, people shooting cops, people, dying because they made a mistake. They used their firearm instead of a taser. Like, we're seeing the worst of the worst and the worst of the mistakes that could possibly happen. But they're also not showing the other side of how many people's lives are saved because they decided to carry that day, or because they went through the concealed carry program and they were carrying their concealed carry on them when they were out eating, and they were able to save lives. And that's actually really unfortunate, because I think that if people would see that there are opportunities where you can prevent, death, you can prevent, innocent lives being lost, I think people would have a different tune. I think people would start to realize, oh, hey, maybe this is something that can be utilized and that can be used as a tool, not just a death machine coming out of, whatever you're firing in your hand. And I think when you're provided with opportunity to learn it properly, when you're provided with the opportunity to do it safely, when then you're given the opportunity to take it upon yourself to decide what you're going to do with it, I think a lot of people would decide that that's a good thing. And again, it's not for everybody. # not all. But anyways. So I actually took the 8-hour armed guard training, and it was actually a really, really fun opportunity. And I can get behind some restrictions as long as it's not prevention. Unless it's something like, somebody is psychologically like psychotic or schizophrenic. I mean, I think individuals that have that kind of, serious mental illnesses, bipolar, and you decide not to take your medication, I think there could be some situations where you can say, okay, maybe this person shouldn't have a firearm. But then at the same time, you have this constitutional right. So you have to decide, okay, well, do I prevent this person from getting it and infringe on the constitutional right? Or do I prevent a possible outcome that could be bad, because that person could have an episode and something bad could happen? I mean, I'm sure there's other smarter people that are going through all that process and trying to figure out the best way to do that. That's why we have background checks, and I honestly feel that we should probably go through some kind of, psychological, at least a questionnaire, so we can have a little bit of checks and balances. But at the same time, I understand that that's a constitutional right. It's given to us not only by the Constitution but by God, and so that's something to kind of be important to focus on and to keep in mind as we talk about this. Oh, that's actually a really interesting point. So Utah is actually one of the lowest of the 50 states since 2013 of gun control and statewide legislation. So kind of what is the requirement to receive a standard CCW? So this is a concealed carry weapons permit. So you must be at least 21 years of age. I think that's fair. You're not kind of fully developed at that point. Your brain is still growing. You're still kind of finding out who you are. But at least that's the legal age. You can drink, you can participate in recreational cannabis. You can do all these things when you're 21. You can't quite rent a car yet, which is interesting. I think you have to be 24 or 25 to do that. And I think there could be some reasoning behind that to say that would, be good or bad. Obviously you have to prove good character. I'm sure you have to have references and stuff like that. Complete a firearms familiarity course certified by BCI. It has not been convicted of a felony. Okay. So, and this is where I think the things kind of get a little bit hairy, because if you have been convicted of a felony, let's say you have a scheduled drug felony, but you don't have a violent crime on you, I don't know. I'm sure they gotta situation by situation, but I think if you get caught with a joint and you get a felony charge because of it, that shouldn't prevent you. I think we've done I think everybody's done exhaustive research and testing on cannabis, and nobody's going to be killing anybody on cannabis. The only other thing that could possibly happen if you do consume cannabis is probably, if you have schizophrenia in your family, you should probably not consider doing that. Obviously, I'm not going to, promote or say not to do something. That's something for you to decide if you're an adult and you have the capacity to decide for yourself and are of age. But I think that's kind of a silly thing, and I think there's definitely some things that need to be like decriminalized, like things like psilocybin, things like cannabis. I think there could be a case made where some of that could be removed from the felony family and misdemeanors, and release people who are nonviolent criminals who've been caught with this stuff. It's just annoying, and I just think they really do need to like kind of go back and kind of think about some of these things. Have not convicted of a violent crime. That's really important. Has not been convicted of any offense involving the use of alcohol, and that's really important, because what's really interesting about alcohol is it is legal. You can participate in drinking alcohol when you're 21, and you can purchase till your heart's desire. So you literally could purchase enough alcohol to kill yourself, which is really sad, especially when it comes to looking at things like cannabis and psilocybin and other things. And so I just think it's really interesting that's in there. But I think it's important too to have something like that in there, because if you are consuming large amounts of alcohol and you're doing things that you're not in your right mind, you're not in your right self, that makes sense to me. And so if you do have offenses involving that, that makes sense, because you're not being you're being negligent at that point. Has not been convicted of any offenses, including the unlawful use of narcotics or other controlled substances. I'm talking about the other stuff that we can talk about. Has not been convicted of any offenses, including moral turpitude. Has not been convicted of any offense involving domestic violence. That's a pretty big one as well. Obviously, if you're hitting and you're physically hurting people, more than likely, if you have a firearm, the possibility of unlifing people is there. So that makes sense. Has not adjudicated by a court of state or the United States as mentally incompetent unless the adjudication has been withdrawn or reversed. So like let's say you were in a mental institution for a few months because, you had a nervous breakdown, but, or you were, off your meds or whatever, and maybe you can get back on your meds and you're fine after you're on your meds. I don't know. There could be a lot of things within that, but that's kind of what I understand it. Is qualified to purchase and possess a firearm. Really important. So I had a little thing here. What's this? I feel like the radical left will use any shooting as an opportunity to restrict, hinder, or completely remove firearms from law-abiding citizens to keep themselves in power. Is this what we want? Tyrannical overseers. Oh, that was actually a really good line. I actually wrote this way a bit back. I just didn't have the chance to actually go over it with you guys. But I think that's really important to understand, is that there's definitely a war coming from the radical left, and they're trying to get guns taken away. They're trying to keep us from being able to speak out, and I think they're doing a really, really good job with their minions who are continuing to cancel people over on social media. And it's really doing a great job, because I have to think about what I'm saying all the effing time, because I want to make sure that I'm portraying what I want to portray, but I also don't want people to not, see and hear and listen to what I have to say. A part of the whole reason I started this podcast thing was for me to learn and to grow, for me to understand what is going on the left, what is going on the right. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes the people on the right aren't all correct all the time. However, they're correct more than they are from the left. But that's just my understanding. That's what's my view. I reserve the right to let that change at any point in time. So, what are some possible constructive or positive outcomes? This is part that I really enjoy. I think there could be some things made for individuals who are younger, who have parents that can like co-sign for them and be responsible for their firearms, where they can have like small game like rifles and shotguns for going hunting. I think that could be a possibility at age 16. Alternatively, age 18, maybe large game hunters, rifles and shotguns. And then, of course, 21 and older, then you can start doing like handguns, concealed carry, and even having like higher caliber, rifles, armor light rifles, also known as ARs, and things like that. I think at that point in time, you're starting to get to the point where you kind of understand who you are. You're not a complete mouth breather. Like, you're starting to kind of understand life. And some people might say, especially the scientific community, say, well, our brains really don't develop until we're somewhere between 24 and 26, maybe even a little older, especially for men, maybe a little bit quicker for women. Some of these wonderful differences between males and females. But it's really important to make sure that everybody is safe without infringing on people's rights. And I think that there can be a happy marriage between the two. I just don't know exactly, what it is and, where we draw the line. And so if you guys have thoughts and feelings about the right to bear arms, I would love to hear your thoughts. So don't forget to hit a comment down there, bro, down below, and let me know your thoughts about where you're at as far as like owning firearms, and what do you think should be helpful to help keep people safe. Do you feel that the background checks are doing great, or do we need to have more in depth in these, what they're calling like universal background checks? I mean, do we need to have psychological evals, or a questionnaire or something like that? Leave me your thoughts. So I kind of started the second part in the wake of the shooting out in Texas, because there were some legislative committees at that time with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. This was in the wake of the Uvalde school shooting, and blaming the police for waiting too long because they were being distracted or unfair. And this is something that's been kind of interesting. And what's interesting is that we haven't really talked about it much, since it actually happened. But this is where I start to believe and feel that it might be a good idea to take volunteers within school staff, school faculty, even teachers who maybe they organize their own militia on campus, and if the event something happens, or they need help, and they need to be in force and actually have the firearms on them, maybe it's time to actually reach out to these individuals, within our classrooms and say, hey, what are your thoughts on, going through, the 8 hour or so, schooling to actually learn how to safely, clean and, actually, get your gun together, and then actually go to shooting range and actually practice it and feel comfortable with it. Or even if they're like retired military, retired police officers that turn, into teachers, have these individuals, give them a little pay bump, and they carry a firearm on them. In fact, I think it'd be even better if they actually had it open carry. So they actually have it on their hips so that people can see them. I think it'd be a little bit interesting to see the mindset of these individuals who actually go into these classrooms and come in with their parents' firearms, or their friends' firearms from their parents or whatever, and they shoot up these schools. I would love to see their thought process once they see that, 20 or 30% of the faculty have firearms on their hips, or they have gun safes in their classrooms with ARs locked up with armor, body armor. So at any point in time, there's an active shooter going on on campus. They open those up, they get their AR, they rack, they put on their body armor, they have their sidearm, they have their ARs. They're ready to go to war and to protect your children. Because here's the issue that we're running into. And I think this Texas shooting is a good example, is that it's getting harder and harder for police officers to do their job and to do it effectively without backlash. Now, I'm a proponent and a person who believes that the buck stops at the person that's in charge and those individuals that are making their own personal decisions. And I believe that it's important that people are held accountable for their decisions and indecisions depending on, the situation. Like if they decide not to do something and, people were hurt because of it, yeah, there should be consequences and ramifications for the things that they didn't do, and vice versa. Like if they did a good job and they did everything they were supposed to do, they should be praised for it. They should get awards. They should, be recognized. And so with this Texas shooting, this is a quote from, I think I got this one from a Fox News article here. So officers are being criticized in reports. They waited outside the school for more than 70 minutes as suspected gunman, Salvador Ramos continued his rampage, ultimately killing 19 students and 2 teachers. And that really bugs me. Like, I really do, support officers, our military. Like I support our armed guards out there, people that they're doing their job correctly, keeping people safe. 70 minutes is too long. And it sucks that this resulted in 19 people, being hurt. And with that being said, there was also individuals that came in and tried to take matters into their own hands to go in there and protect people. I think at some point, if I remember the article correctly, there was actually an off-duty like cop or police officer or somebody who actually went and found somebody, borrowed like a shotgun or something, and then went into the school to take care of this individual that was an active shooter, because the police that were there would not go in. And there were parents and family members arriving on scene, begging them to go in and to protect their kids. And this is one of those examples where we need to say, hey, your inaction caused a lot of damage here. I really do believe that the person in charge should possibly have disciplinary action, even up to termination. I think it's really important for people to take responsibility for the things that they do. So apparently that's what happened. That's what I understand. Now, obviously you're going to correct me and let me know in the comment section down below. But in my eyes, and I have a lot of police officers, I have a really good friend who's a police officer out in Surprise. I have close friends on the force out here in this small town that we're in. And if they're in a situation where this was happening, I would expect them to go in and take care of business. And to saving lives, many lives as they possibly can. But with that being said, police response is not always immediate. Like, it takes time for police officers to get together, to get the SWAT group together, to get all their gear on, to, pile into the van and the SWAT team and get the helicopters off the ground and they get the vans out and going, and then drive to the place. So like, you might be 5, 10, 15, even maybe upwards of 20, 30 minutes, depending on where you're at, for the police to arrive. So what is going to happen in between that time? A lot of people are probably gonna die, unfortunately. And so with that being said, this is why I believe we need to find people that are willing to volunteer to take these classes, to have open carries, to have concealed carries, to have gun safes in certain classrooms with people who are trained and ready to go on these things, so that they can respond promptly and quickly, and to end the situation before it gets worse. So this is where I question things. So why did the tens of officers wait for 70 minutes while this gunman killed 19 students and 2 teachers? So what were they doing? Well, unfortunately, the footage shows that they were standing around, not engaging. And even officers asked, the supervisor on site, when do we go in? Are we going in? No, we're not doing anything. And so I'm really curious. So I'm curious when politicians realize that we need to address mental health instead of the tools that were used in others' destruction. I think that's something we need to address. I think it's really interesting that they go, oh, let's blame the tool. We're not trying to prevent people from driving when people are killed in drunk driving accidents, or people are ran over by vehicles because they were in a compromised mental state, or they were high, or they were drunk, or, psychotic breakdown, whatever, name it. Why aren't we taking cars away from people? Why aren't we minimizing the purchase of vehicles? It's the same dang thing. Obviously car versus, firearm. I know it's not the same dang thing, but it's definitely very similar situations, and we're not blaming it. I think it's really important that officers, military personnel, people go into it understanding, hey, you're going to be having firearms. You may be put in situations where you need to protect people in life and death situations. Are you willing to engage and protect those around you? I think that should be a question that should be said. I don't know if it is or not. I'm assuming it is. I think that's a very reasonable thing to ask somebody. Hey, you're going to be a part of the police force. Maybe you should understand you might die and you might kill somebody in these situations. Are you willing to cope with that? Are you willing to work through that? And it sucks that we're not getting, the stuff that we need. Not only to our veterans, not only to our retired, police officers, or medical leaved police officers, or, people aren't getting what they need. Even just us regular normies and civilians out there, we're not getting what we need for our mental health. We are overworked. We are underpaid. Oftentimes in thankless positions. Oftentimes told just, put your head down and just do as we say, do what you're told. And then they go to find somebody to talk to other than, their close friends or spouse, because who wants to put their mental burdens on loved ones? Nobody wants to do that. And honestly, kudos to you if you're that person that you can rely on to talk to you about the things that are going on in their brains. Not everybody has that. And then when you try to go and get help, you have to basically take out a second mortgage to get the help that you need. And this is coming from somebody who has taken the opportunity to get mental help. It's too damn expensive. And who knows who you're getting that's going to help you through stuff, or to try to just, steer you to the left or steer you to the right, or whatever the case may be. I mean, hopefully you are getting help from individuals who actually care, who have a very objective outlook on life, and who can objectively walk you through things, get you the medication if you need, get the tools that you need to work through anxiety, panic attacks, thoughts of unlifing yourself. It's important that we get through these things. And I think it's really interesting that we didn't talk about mental health, before the internet, before the technological, age that we're in right now. Because nobody talked about it. Just like concussions, TBI. Nobody talked about that before, 20, 30 years ago. I know we didn't talk about it when I was in Pee Wee football. I know we didn't talk about it when I was, thinking about going into football when I was in high school. I've had 4 concussions in my life. And the last one that I had when I was on the job 3 or 4 years ago, it took me a while to get out of it. I was unconscious for at least, 60 seconds to 2 or 3 minutes before the customer's house that I was installing the security system in came down into the basement and found me on the floor unconscious. I had 7 staples in my head. I think it was 5. I think it was 5. I might be. I think my fish story is getting a little bit bigger. No, but I had 5 staples put in my head. Had a nice little arc on top of my head somewhere around here or whatever. But yeah, for several weeks I was much slower. My capacity to find words was much more difficult. And even today, like I struggle sometimes to find words, like simple and easy words that I should be able to know and understand. Sometimes I look at the word what and I look at it and I go, that's spelled wrong, but W-H-A-T is how it's spelled. And so I'm sitting there Googling it a couple of times just to confirm, because for some reason my brain is not acknowledging that that is correct. So anyways, it looks like we're getting some help. It looks like Ohio governor signs a bill to make it easier for teachers and staff to carry guns. And this is actually from a CNN. So Washington CNN, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine on Monday, whenever this particular article came out, signed a bill into law that makes it easier for teachers and staff to carry guns to school premises. And I think it's very, very interesting. The majority of these shootings are in gun-free zones. I don't know, something to think about. The Republican-backed bill reduced the hours of training required for armed school personnel from 700 hours to 24. Because obviously these people aren't peace officers. You know, nobody's going to have that much time required for armed school personnel. I think that's even ridiculous, probably for some officers. So those 700 hours of training are intended to broadly train law enforcement. DeWine, a Republican, said during the news briefing Monday, adding the vast majority of that training is not really relevant to a school safety directly. Examples of unnecessary training included patrolling in a police cruiser, stopping a vehicle, investigating a traffic accident, operating radar, etc. Legislation does not require arming staff at school, but allows a choice, emphasized DeWine. Now, if a school district to arm staff members, the bill mandates up to 24 hours of school-specific training. And I'm hoping in that school training they at least have the opportunity to go out and do target practice. That's really important. And if you're going to carry, and especially if you're going to conceal carry or open carry, you better be training yourself at least every couple of months and going to the range. Because otherwise, I mean, even Dan Bongino, who's somebody who worked with the Secret Service in protecting President Obama while he was in office, he had to fire his firearm and go to the range at least once a month and shoot a couple of times. Otherwise, he could notice that there was a difference in waning as far as like his ability to be on target. Something to think about. Training required includes 4 scenario-based hours as well as first aid, the history and pattern of school shootings, de-escalation, I think is really important, techniques, and crisis intervention. Because if somebody does come on school campus and starts shooting and you have people and personnel able to and ready to take action, they need to be ready to go. And they need to have at least some kind of techniques and some kind of way to at least try to de-escalate before they open fire. At least try to talk to the person, talk them down. I think if at any time you can do that and everybody goes home safely, I think that's your first option. I think the idea of shoot first, ask questions later, or shoot first and let God sort it out is not the right way to do it, because we're human beings, and I think a lot of times we make mistakes. And I think people who are not in a perfect state, not being themselves, you can do things that you don't normally do. Measure applies to school staff not being employed as a special police officer or security officer, so who are authorized to go armed within school safety zone. Authorized to carry guns in school must have a criminal background check each year under the bill, and they're required to take up to 8 hours of requalification training. I think that's great. Good on you, Ohio. I actually installed security systems in Ohio, around the Cleveland area. So kudos to you guys. That makes me very proud. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in that. I do want to get to my last thing here, and so I got about 10-ish minutes left, so I want to jump into that. I think it's important to understand that, the radical left does not want you to have firearms. They do not want you to have the freedom of speech. They do not want you to be able to say what you want to say on these platforms. And what's interesting is that this is spilling into the workplace now. Not only is it, being perpetuated, especially like critical race theory and things like that, to our schools, especially to our younger children, talking about LBGT stuff, which is not okay. This is not good for kids. That's kind of my line. I think, once you're an adult or in a place where, a parent can speak to a younger child, 14 or 16, and maybe they can help them understand stuff, I think that's more important than trying to see, drag shows with children or to talk about these topics in children's shows. I think it's not appropriate. But, with that being said, I think you should do you. And I think if you're of age, you have the ability and capacity to have consent, both to give and to take consent, as well as you have with the other person as well. You do you. Once you're an adult, you can go marry who you want. You can say whoever use whatever pronouns you want within you and your circles, but it's not appropriate in the workplace. It's not appropriate in the job. It's not appropriate for children. That's kind of where my line is at right now, and that could change in the future. I don't know. But now, polls are not accurate. Like, polls just like take, a few hundred people, a few thousand people, and kind of say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? But those things aren't accurate as far as like a broad spectrum of it. But as far as we understand, there's about 3%, 3 to 5%, somewhere around there, that they're saying is identifying themselves as LBGT, whatever more acronyms you want to add. And then there's a 2017 Harris poll commissioned by GLAAD. It's an LGBTQ advocacy group. And they say that in between the ages of 18 and 35 identify as gender neutral. So they don't identify as male or female. Even though nature tells us, even though science tells us, even religion agrees, there's male and female. There are differences, and that's something to think about as well. But for years, corporate America has worked to create safe and friendly spaces for the LBGT communities, individuals, whatever exactly that means. Now, my personal experience, I had gay, lesbian, and bi friends growing up. I had a gay friend who basically wanted to trade sex for an invite and into raid groups in World of Warcraft, which was very, very awkward. Of course, I declined. It's not something that I do. I even struggled myself with my sexuality because at that time when I was between 16 and 18, I wasn't really going out and seeking out dates and stuff like that, because I just wanted to focus and get through school and get on to the next part of my life. And I just wanted to really enjoy and being present at that time when I was growing up. I very much am attracted to women. The only reason I questioned it was because, different parents as well as my parents were kind of curious. So you're not going on dates. What is this, because in our culture, especially growing up in a very Christian-based home, and being LDS, that was kind of the thing. 16, you start out dating. 18, 19, you go serve your mission, you come back home, you get married, you make babies, and you continue on with your life. With that being said, I don't understand. And the more I've read, and maybe I just need to look in the right places, but all the LBGT stuff I've researched and looked at different articles and stuff, The words are, we want a safe place and we want to have safe and friendly workplaces. And I'm like, okay, so in what capacity are you not having a safe and friendly workplace, number one? And number two, this also kind of denotes that, there's some kind of disparity or some kind of discrimination against somebody who is, lesbian, gay, or trans or whatever. Now, again, you do you. Line. It's not appropriate for work. It's not appropriate for children. Okay. And what's really important to understand for me is like, okay, well then why exactly do you feel like you're being discriminated? Because, and this is the thing that I hear, again, this is what I've understood and what I've researched is that, if we're not using these things called pronouns, and basically means that the person is identifying something different than him, her, or she, him, or whatever, and they want to use a neutral counterpart of their, or they want to use some other, get kind of outside of that, becomes kind of silly words, in my opinion. All the different pronouns that I've read are very, very silly. And so a lot of these different companies that are obviously in Hollywood, that are in the filmmaking business, a lot of these are more left-leaning, and they want to be a part of including everybody, and they want to force inclusion. And I don't think that's okay. I feel like inclusion is great. I think diversity is great as long as they're in the right position and doing their jobs well. Like I don't really understand why people are being hired because of, the color of their skin, or because they're gay, or because they're lesbian, or because they're trans, and not hiring the person that's right for that role. And then they can act because they're actors. They pretend to be someone that they are or are not. And so it's interesting to see these different companies who are trying to follow suit with companies like Disney, with places like Microsoft, Coca-Cola. Like, they're all starting to do this thing where that they're starting to do more neutral gender pronouns. Like, Disney even announced that they're going to start saying, instead of welcome boys and girls, they just say welcome everyone, or, we're glad that you're here. They don't say like little boy and little girl anymore. And this is something that's supposed to be the happiest place on earth, and that's supposed to be catering to children. And I think it's interesting that they're pushing, the narrative of identity politics onto children as well. And I don't think that's appropriate. It's really interesting. I was reading some of these articles from this LBGT article that talked about, they have like all these like Fortune 500 companies, and they have over 200 companies who are trying to follow suit and trying to make this safe space, that's safe and friendly for LBGT, individuals. And I'm just like, okay, well, what's really interesting is I'm not seeing any citations of instances where these individuals were discriminated against. And did they know exactly why they were discriminated against? As somebody who hires and has hired and fired people in the past, excuse me, I don't really care about your ideals. I don't really care about your political leanings, your ideologies, your faith, whether you're black, white, brown, or yellow, or purple for that matter. It doesn't matter as long as I'm hiring you to do a job and you can do it well. That's the only thing that I cared about. Like, I had like lesbian and gay people on my team. I had black, white, and brown people on my team. And these are technicians that I managed. I did not care who they were, what the color of their skin was, what their sexuality situation was. I didn't care. All I cared was that you went and you did your job well. And that's great. I really do not believe that political ideologies, sexual ideologies or leanings, sexual preferences, your pronouns, I think that is not appropriate, 100%. Not appropriate for children, not appropriate for work. And it's interesting that I'm not seeing where we need more laws. I'm not seeing where, we need protective orders, or company policies and procedures to protect certain individuals with the color of their skin or their sexuality. I don't see how that has to do with the workplace. And it could be that I'm wrong. And I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section down below of this video. So I don't know what more we need, especially catering to a very, very small group of society. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, and there's policies in place with different colleges to meet a certain requirement. This is required by law and by the government to allow a certain number of Asian students or a certain number of black students or a certain number of Latino students. And I think that's not appropriate. Those are just my thoughts and my feelings. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, hopefully we have earned your subscription today. So don't forget to hit that red subscribe button and click that damn bell and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a content release. And as always, from my family to yours, good night. Hello everyone, Jay Rhymes with the Periodic Review. Today's video is sponsored by viewers like you, so thank you. Hopefully we've earned your subscription today, so don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit that damn bell to turn on your notifications so you don't miss a content release. Check out the video links at the end of every video to view our previous content, as well as visit the description section for more links to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and from my family to yours, good night.